from 12 people to now we have over 3,000 people who are able to respond to questions. And it's that critical mass building that helps you find that job, get that house mortgage at a discount, or just make friends, get married. People have gotten married through the relational social happy hours we've had as well.
Wow. So what do the people who come on the network, your app, what are their biggest issues?
Usually it's getting to know people, finding their feet. A lot of people will tell you they got on the plane, got down, and somebody said, go find Ahaspora because you'll find people like you. You know, when you know how it is, Reverend, mindset is important. We have a similar mindset by virtue of having gone abroad and struggled through it and made that decision to try it back home. And so having like-minded individuals in a space, I think is very useful for people. So for a lot of people, that's what they're looking for. And then jobs would be number 2.
This is Springboard, your virtual university. My guest, Christabel Dadzie, helped me to understand Ahaspora, her mother's own interpretation of aha, and then you're also Esperan. Telling me how she's helping people to brain gain into our system and find their way back. It's something I've done for years, and in different spaces of time, it's been easier or more difficult depending on what is happening here economically. But she has a model that says, listen, it's not even just about totally relocating. Just have a program that says, don't lose touch with home, because when you do, you've lost it forever. When I come back from this break, I'm going to find out from her what she will say to those who say, Charlie, why should they even consider, if they finally get on the plane and Japa and get there, why should they even bother to come back? And then also find out from her about deliberate export of talent, as happens in some of the Asian countries, and then marrying that with our nurses who seem to have found a new Jerusalem. When I come back, let's talk about that. Please don't go away.
Pascal is showing his boss the efficient new technology they've installed. She is pleased, but now she's asking, why is that still there? Pascal explains that he hired a security goat to protect the data shed. The boss is not so pleased anymore. If you haven't upgraded to cloud storage yet, it's time to get business done better with MTN Business.
Whether it's 1924, 2024, or 2124, we've always known that you are driven by your sense of safety and well-being. It is what drives us to see you through from start to finish, from small to big. And in the last 100 years, as you have evolved, so have we also expanded to serve you in many ways. From cradle to grave, with expertise in insurance, life, pensions, properties, health, and for those beautiful, memorable goodbyes. It's 2024, and in all our markets, our pedigree is recognized, our strength respected, our expertise valued, and our solutions sought by all who desire an advantage in life. Experience the time-tested and truly trusted 100 years legacy of Ghana's oldest insurer. Take charge of your future now. Insurance, life, pensions, property management, funeral services, health insurance. Enterprise, your advantage.
Welcome back to Springboard, a virtual university, and to this amazing conversation with Christabel Dadzie, founder of Ahaspora, helping us to appreciate the journey, the learnings, the project of trying to refocus the minds of people, professionals working across the world on their own home and contributing, coming back to their home and finding their place or reintegrating back into this nation. This is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and Enterprise Group, with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. So, Christabel, several years ago, my good friend KSM wrote a play called The Saga of the Returnee. It sold out over and over and over again. And it was a really good production. And he talked about the conflicts in the mind of the returnee trying to integrate, and if I may borrow your words, the good, the bad, and the ugly of finding yourself back home. But that also connects with one of my favorite literary works, The Dilemma of the Ghost by Ama Ateidu, and the fact that if it was the returnee struggled to connect with the local. These struggles, are they real, and is it the fault of one or the other? Let's speak to that.
The struggles are real. I think the difference is time also makes it a different type of struggle, but it's a struggle. And the struggle is that you've lost your roots. That's the truth. Whether you decided to leave or you left because of economic issues or even you were kicked out, it's a base that has been removed. And on the kicked out part is like the African Americans. So when you come back, you've lost time. And making up time, as you know, is very difficult. So from the satire to the book, it's real life, it's experiences. KSM will tell you it's its own experiences. A lot of us come back home and we think that we can pick it. It's like a cookie cutter kind of situation where we can pick what we learned in the West and then just apply it. And then you come and have some realities and you're just stuck, you're blocked, you know? And you also come back and find out that people are doing very well. So sometimes you question yourself as well. So it's a lot of mind games that will play with you regardless of how you return. So I find those two very different, but very, very fascinating, but a reality that we face. Now, for example, my father left the shores at 18 to go to medical school and would come visit, but didn't really come back till retirement. He is facing a different struggle than when I left after high school, and then I came back 13 years later, because I still have all growing up to do in Ghana and the continent that will make me mature differently than my father, who is set in his German ways and is going to be expected to understand that trotro drivers weave through traffic. And he was going to stand for his rights. And if you're not careful, that turns into an accident.
Funeral services, health insurance, enterprise for your advantage.
Welcome back to Springboard Virtual University and to this amazing conversation with Christabel Dadzie, founder of Ahaspora, helping us to appreciate the journey, the learnings, the project of trying to refocus the minds of people, professionals working across the world on their own home and contributing, coming back to their home and finding their place or reintegrating back into this nation. This is brought to you by the Springboard Ratio Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and Enterprise Group, with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. So, Christabel, several years ago, my good friend KSM wrote a play called The Saga of the Returnee. It sold out over and over and over again. And it was a really good production. And he talked about the conflicts in the mind of the returnee, trying to integrate, and if I may borrow your words, the good, the bad, and the ugly of finding yourself back home. But that also connects with one of my favorite literary works, The Dilemma of the Ghost by Ama Ateidu, and the fact that if it was the returnee struggled to connect with the local. These struggles, are they real, and is it the fault of one or the other? Let's speak to that.
The struggles are real. I think the difference is time also makes it a different type of struggle, but it's a struggle. And the struggle is that you've lost your roots. That's the truth. Whether you decided to leave or you left because of economic issues or even you were kicked out, it's a base that has been removed. And on the kicked out part is like the African Americans. So when you come back, you've lost time. And making up time, as you know, is very difficult. So from the satire to the book, it's real life, it's experiences. KSM will tell you it's its own experiences. A lot of us come back home and we think that we can pick it. It's like a cookie cutter kind of situation where we can pick what we learned in the West and then just apply it. And then you come and have some realities and you're just stuck, you're blocked, you know? And you also come back and find out that people are doing very well. So sometimes you question yourself as well. So it's a lot of mind games that will play with you regardless of how you return. So I find those two very different, but very, very fascinating, but a reality that we face. Now, for example, my father left the shores at 18 to go to medical school and would come visit, but didn't really come back till retirement. He is facing a different struggle than when I left after high school, and then I came back 13 years later, because I still have all growing up to do in Ghana and the continent that will make me mature differently than my father, who is set in his German ways and is going to be expected to understand that trotro drivers weave through traffic. And he was going to stand for his rights. And if you're not careful, that turns into an accident. What do you do?
So there's a bit of unlearning to do, relearning.
Absolutely.
And all the internal conflicts that come with it.
Yes.
Let me swing to the countries that deliberately export talent as a national policy. What do you think of it?
I think it's an excellent idea.
So
I think as much as possible, everyone should be exposed to new countries. Whenever I travel, be it for work or for pleasure, I always go to the local bars. And I talk to the bars and talk to people when they are relaxed about their society. And you learn something different than when you're reading a book or you're looking at social media. You learn about intricacies of how they're proud of where they're from, or how conflict has shaped them, or how human rights abuses have made them a different breed. You know, I talk to the taxi drivers who will tell me the true story. Yes.
And the barbers.
And exactly, you know, and I appreciate the culture. I think it enriches who I am as a person when I understand how a Filipino thinks differently than a Ghanaian, or the commonalities we have, because you'll find that there are many as well. So if I had my own way, everybody would travel. I joke, but I actually hope it happens that one day I'll be rich and I'll put a plane ready, open for young people who want to go. And I'll send them to Wisconsin, USA in February, intentionally.
Why?
Because it's snowing, it's cold, it's freezing. You're going to freeze out of your mind. You're going to experience, because I feel like, look, Reverend, we have the boggers come back after 25 years with gold chains and Range Rovers. But they know that for 25 years they were working 15, 16-hour shifts. A lot of them were living in one bedrooms with 8 people sharing beds. That's not the life we live here.
Are you suggesting that things are tougher out there than people make it out to be?
They are, and they are even if you went the way I went, which was have a scholarship and go to school.
It's tough, eh?
I worked in the kitchen. I have never worked in a kitchen in Ghana. Let's be real about it. But I say this, and I also say to my mentees that if I was in graduate school babysitting to make money so that I could live in New York City, why don't you want to try those sorts of jobs here? And all we want to do is sit in an office and cross our legs. So the two,
It's real.
It's real, and the two shape you in a way. And we need to tell the true stories. But interestingly enough, when you tell the not so good stories, they say it's because you've been and you don't want us to go. And that's not true.
Can you tell me one or two? For the road.
No, so I've been fortunate. I went to school and then I found jobs. But I also know people. I went to Columbia University for graduate school. And I know Africans who sat at home for 2 years and couldn't find jobs by nature of their color. They put in their resumes and they are probably some of the best.
Educated there?
They educated there. They show up for interviews. They went to Ivy League institutions and they can't find jobs.
Some would argue that here too they can't find jobs.
True. However, I also think there's a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities that we could pick up on. Or like I said, I'm cleaning tables in the US. Why can't I go and start a cleaning service in Ghana where I support people like my mother who's 75 years old. And because of the way things have changed in this world, she wants to still live in the house on her own, but she needs help.
Somebody once said to me that when you sell your family land or raise all that money and travel and get there and realize it's not like you think, you just can't come back.
No, you cannot.
You say you are there, but you can't come back because how do you explain that, Uncle Yi?
This is it. And this is why we don't get the true stories, because for some, it's great. What I like about home is I can do new things. I can be special. When I returned home, a young girl needed 160 Ghana cedis to be able to go to school. Her family was choosing her brother over her because that's all they could afford. 160 Ghana cedis. At the time, it was something like $16 or $20. I gave that young girl 160 Ghana cedis a term, and it was nothing to me. And today she's in the university.
You feel good about it.
I feel so fulfilled.
Nice.
I couldn't have done that in the US.
Right.
One, it will cost more. I couldn't have excelled. I couldn't have built an Ahaspora in the US. And I feel like this is what we need to understand, that because it's a developing country, there's opportunity for you to set yourself apart. In the same industries, they say there's nothing new under the sun, and I believe that, right? But you can join in partnerships with people and thrive. And if you get the chance to go and be exposed and sometimes go through some of these struggles, but you eat your humble pie and come back home, you come back and you'll probably be one of the top Ghanaians.
Let's settle on the fact that there also are people who are doing incredible things out there and doing very, very well. I mean, that's the balance of the story that we need to bring.
Absolutely. I was doing well. I had a good job. I had a car. I had an apartment. If I pay my electricity bill, the lights stay on. So I was comfortable. And I could have kept going and I would thrive because there are stepping stones out there that help you. There's structure that allows you to follow a path and thrive. So I'm not trying to say that staying abroad is a bad thing. No, not at all. The story needs to be balanced. The same way that we also need to balance the story of the people who go and struggle and don't come back and tell it. What I'm saying is that, and I'm actually also not saying everybody should come back home. The reality is that there's a space for everybody to thrive, and you need to start from yourself. If you are going to come back home, you need to come because it's something you want to do. I came back home because my grandfather taught us that it's important for us at any point to give back. And when I made that journey, it was a personal one. It wasn't by pressure. It wasn't because it was the next thing to do. And what that did for me is that when I went through my struggles of the return, I still went back to my purpose. I still went back to my community I built. The community that now has become bigger than me, that is seeing investments, that is contributing to the diaspora policy, that is looking Africa-wide. And now I can't just say, okay, Christabel, I'm tired, I won't do this anymore. Because there was an intention, way bigger.
Let's go back to where it all began. You mentioned Abri Girls. When you were in Abri Girls, did you think that you will be doing this?
No, not for a second.
What was the plan?
The plan was to finish my economics, geography, elective math degree and go to University of Ghana and maybe become a lawyer like my mother.
And then what happened?
And then I finished the Abri Girls and there was a strike in Ghana. So there was a 1-year gap and I started applying to schools. And my two sisters went to the UK. And my brother was the first to go to the US and insisted that it was the US. The US provided a tertiary education. That was what would propel the world. So that's what I should do. So I started going to, at the time, USAID to look into the books. And once I found the school, the college I went to in Ohio, and I left, in the college, like I mentioned, it was in the middle of nowhere. On my way from the airport to the school, I was very concerned. Cows smelling, grass, barns, and I'm like, hey,
is this a British?
What is this that I've done to myself? And it was funny because when they talk about culture shock, they're thinking you're from the continent and not developed, and now you're coming to America and they need to help you through culture shock. And I said, I don't know if you call it reverse culture shock, but my shock is not a positive one. I am in the middle of nowhere and I don't understand. I'm a city girl, you know? But what that did for me is that I went to a liberal arts, very small liberal arts college. There wasn't anything to do in the town. So I stayed on campus and I built leadership. And I was part of the first inaugural ambassadors program at Worcester. That was a foundation that gave a grant for 5 people for a year to study their countries and be ambassadors. And this is the building that I got of why I'm Ghanaian, why I love to wear fabric, why I like to tell our story, how we are who we are as a result of being the first African country to gain independence. So it wasn't the plan at all, but it got built over time. And even the coming back, at some points, I may not have come. And that's okay too. But there was just that inkling. And this is where I really appreciate my maternal grandfather who, you know, was part of, you know, the independence movement. There's the front liners and then there's, he was one of them. Right. And he would tell us stories of all the things he experienced during independence and just made us hungry and patriotic. So coming home was always at the back of my mind and something to do. And then I got here and, you know, as God would do it, selfishly, I needed a support system. Didn't find it and created it.
Let's talk about the power of deliberateness. What do you think? How important, especially as we start a new year? Well, the year is already, a tenth of it almost already gone, but how important is deliberateness?
I think in our conversation, we talked about how people are exported abroad. You can allow people to go, get on the boats, and they'll figure it out, or you can be intentional about it. We talked about the year of return. You can allow people to just enter Ghana when they feel like it, or you can be intentional and say, this is a destination that you should consider. I think in leadership, deliberateness is important. My story, same thing. Creating Ahaspora was a deliberate reason for me to stay, or to at least be around people like me and build my continent. Somebody may do it through investment banking. I'm doing it through building community and building partnerships at almost, you can call it a local level. But you have people who tell you stories about how they came and they literally were leaving and somebody said, go to an Ahaspora social networking event. They met people, had conversations, and today they are partnering in businesses here in Ghana.
The rest is history.
And the rest
Let's talk about nurses.
Yes.
Nurses. I know several professionals are on the bandwagon, but the case of the nurses is quite an interesting one. You speak to some of them and they say, listen, we graduated and we don't have jobs. And the figures that they call that are available if we found ourselves in certain countries are just too mouth-watering. And it's not even like we have an option. How can deliberateness be brought? If you were the decision maker, what kind of thoughts would run through your head about how to handle the nurses side of things?
If I were the decision maker, and I studied development, so I'm actually also talking theoretically as well as in practice, I would consider the highest paying jobs to be nurses, teachers, doctors, the medical field and the educational field. I am convinced that if we figure out our education, we will go places. But you can't figure out education and have unhealthy people. So to me, and I'm not a nurse or a teacher, so I'm not being biased, these two professions need to be elevated in terms of the perks that they get. And this is the model abroad. So the nurses that are leaving to go abroad are going to get paychecks that they've never seen before in their lives. They're going to work hard, no doubt about it, but they work hard here as well. So there's a system that we need to look at that propels how we can have more of them stay and be comfortable. But also we should send them off, because when we do it deliberately, they earn skills that they may not be exposed to here that they can bring back at different points of their lives for those who will return. So that's what I think. It's a bit controversial, but that's what I think.
Well, that's okay. I mean, so you are saying that instead of, they'll go anyway, so instead of just letting them go, facilitate the process and have a stake in it.
Absolutely.
Talking about nurses and going abroad and working hard, let me greet Professor Lydia Aziatu, Vice Chancellor of UHAS, who's shared a very interesting story about working abroad and using a hoist for the first time. Here she would have to carry the patient, and then she talked about the pleasant surprise of using a hoist to do what she would typically do manually. But I find that in her case, for instance, having worked here and having worked there, she comes back with a different mindset and then becomes the first nurse to become vice chancellor, because the exposure gives her much more breadth. And so that's another case of the benefit of experiencing different worlds.
Absolutely.
Have you ever failed before, Christabel?
Oh, so many times.
Tell me about failure.
It's not fun. Particularly for a person who's a perfectionist like me. I was brought up by two perfectionists as parents. You've met Kofi, so you know what I'm saying. Failure is hard. Failure is hard. I failed many times. Almost failed my elective math exam when I had all A's and the rest, but that one was my own fault. I failed at marriage. And that was tough. That was tough because I make good decisions as far as I'm concerned, and this one was a difficult one. I had to really be intentional about how I rise from it. I failed at work.
Let me pause for a minute
and
borrow you, since you've been so kind, and I'm using my words advisedly, since you've been so kind and so bold to mention something that people would rather stay off, that you say you failed at. Take a minute to talk to somebody who also is struggling or did not make it in that space, and share your heart with them. Unbiased. I'll take your thoughts, and that works with me.
Yeah.
If somebody didn't make it and feels and is carrying the weight of that loss 10 years, 15 years, what would you tell them?
Reverend, I think it starts with young women. I think there's a high pressure on young women to be married, and I experienced it. And I am a pretty, I'd say, bold person. So I worry for the timid young Ghanaian woman who is trying to pursue a career, but marriage, until they are married, they haven't arrived, as we say in our society. And I think that pressure actually makes people make hurried decisions. And I would like to encourage people to be okay with not being married. I like to start from there, because this is some of the analysis that I've had my internal introspection. There's also pieces where, and you will know this, there's no one size fits all. And so you may get it wrong, and that's okay too. My biggest pain in the process when I knew I needed to leave was the fact that I was blaming myself for not having seen that this was not something I should have done. And God bless Reverend Inkum, whom you may know, who counseled me and helped me through the journey of forgiving myself and knowing that you won't always get it right, and that's okay. And having gone through that therapy was why I can sit here today and smile and do the things I do. And the other thing I'll say also is talk about it. I didn't talk about my problems as much as I should have. Have that circle. Why? Also because I was brought up to shut the door and be strong. I'm supposed to be a strong.
Are you alone in that? Are we not all raised like that to hide our struggles
for the most part,
and carry it?
For the most part.
What happens when we do that?
It's a problem. You maybe could have gotten information that would help you appreciate what you are going through and deal with it maybe differently. From the beginning, maybe not even go in, or when you are in, what to do with it. Vulnerability is important, but you have to find the right circle also because we're a very tiny society. I mean, Reverend, we need to talk about it. This is the first time I've actually openly talked about it.
I feel very honored that you shared.
And I know people will bash me for talking about it.
Why?
Too. Because it's a small country and people will know. There are some people who know who the two of us are.
You've not mentioned the other party. You talk about yourself.
People can figure it out. So people don't have these conversations because it's not allowed. I mean, the first thing is just even the societal bashing of a woman being divorced already has its own
I've had some of my finest guests on this show talk boldly about the not having made it in that space, and several people reach out to say, "Oh, you blessed me because you shared about your vulnerability and the fact that you failed before."
Yeah.
I think that we sometimes are very unkind to ourselves because we don't allow people to say, "I'm struggling."
Yes.
Because they must look good and sound good. I once said to somebody, "You're struggling with your business. Why don't you talk about it?" He says, "It's more fashionable to say, I struggled sometimes.
At the past.
But you can't say it when you are going through."
Yes.
Let's talk about the implications for mental health, for instance.
This is it.
Because you mentioned therapy, you mentioned counseling.
Yes.
Would it be your opinion that there are people who could be helped, but who are carrying the whole world as it were on their shoulders?
I've met a lot, even in the workspace. Women who are not okay, they are bipolar, and we don't talk about it. Today she's screaming, tomorrow she's smiling. All the signs are there, but for us, somebody who needs help is the one who is the mad person who's naked on the streets. We need to take mental health more seriously. The other piece that is even a big one is emotional abuse. We don't talk enough about it.
Why?
Because it's easier to go and say, "Oh, my husband beats me." Oh, yes, then you can leave the marriage. But for me to explain why I needed to leave, it didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense to some people. But I knew what's mentally and emotionally what it was doing to the person I was. And I had to walk away from it, right? And I think that we need to have these conversations at Ahaspora for our mentees. And by the way, I keep saying mentees. Give back is a big part of what we do. We have a session called Tell It Like It Is, and we divide girls and guys so that they can have these conversations. And we should have them early. These are high schoolers. We don't have these conversations enough in school. Yes, you learn about biology and the body, but we need to talk more about our society and some of the pressures it has on us to be a certain way. I heard somebody saying that a certain politician had gone to get married so he could be vice president. Really? So he's not good enough because he's not married? That's a problem.
If you had a chance to change a course in our academic curriculum, free reign, introduce any course that you like, what would it be?
Now that I say this, maybe this, but I would actually have said more on career development.
So you're going to give me 2 slots?
I'll give me 2. So one would be to have these true discussions around psychology. What happens in the mind as you're growing up, what it means. And the intersection with religion. Because I do think religion is part of why we can't have some of these conversations.
Help me to understand.
Reverend Okran, you have young girls who are raped, and they'll go and tell their mothers or their aunties, and the response will be, "Oh, Papa ni esofo. He's a priest or a pastor." he's high in society. We don't do that. Fashion, keep it to yourself. I can name names, many, 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 many names.
So why do they do that?
Because that is the structure we have. We don't, how do they say, touch not the anointed. That mentality means that you don't speak truth to power.
Is that a meaning of that scripture?
No, it's not. But that it's a translation of how we use it a lot, in a lot of examples, and it's a problem. And I'm just using this one example. It's just one. It's in the workplace as well. So I would like to tell real stories, bring people in. And I know some schools like Ashesi does this a lot, where they bring people from the workplace into the leadership classes to have real life conversations. Our young people are struggling for it. When you open up to them, the things they tell you. Recently, we had our 25th anniversary of Abri Girls, and there was a mentoring session. And when you hear what the young girls say,
we do that teenpreneurship. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Sometimes you leave the place in tears because of the brokenness of some of the young people and the experiences that they are going through. Mm-hmm. With what you do, Christabel, as we wrap up this conversation, 10 years from now, what would you call success?
Success for me in my professional life would be to go all the way up to the top in the World Bank, which is where I work, vice president.
Breaking news.
Success for me also would be to see the dream of Ahaspora go beyond Ghana. It was a movement for the continent, not just Ghana. And I think we've established something good here in Ghana, and we need to set examples across where we start building a critical mass of people that partner together in politics, partner together in investments, partner together in even friendships, build bonds across the continent. So that this, after we talk about AFCTA, African Free Trade, is not just a talk, but it's a reality. So that we can go across the continent with visas, and not need visas, for example. We can trade, we can go beyond our language barriers. So for me, that is the dream. It's scary. It's almost impossible from where I sit, on both counts actually, but it will happen. I believe it.
That's what makes it beautiful. Christabel, before I let you go, reluctantly, you must promise you should come back again and let's do this one more time. But before I let you go, I would like you to look into this camera. And you are a fellow of Aliwa, and you have a project, and I'm sure Ahaspora is your project. Okay. So for the benefit of anyone, look into camera and talk to that young person listening and saying, a lot of what she's saying connects so powerfully to me. Give them a message of hope as they spring into this year 2024 that lies ahead of them. Give them a message for the year ahead.
So I live by two terms. The first one is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I live by that term because much was given to me. I was lucky to have education, I was lucky to have profession, and so I have to give back. But I also want young people to know that much is given to everyone, even if it's very, very little. So wherever you are, and this is my second term, you surely have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And your world could be the fact that you're a chorister and you go early and clean the chairs so that people don't sit on dirty chairs. Leadership is not just president of, vice president of. Leadership is seeing a tiny little problem in your community, seeing mothers who just need help carrying their babies and stepping up to do it. And I think that if you take that approach in life, you will really thrive. But on your way to thriving, know that it's a ladder and you need to take it a step at a time. And it's okay sometimes when you have to go back. Had the conversation of failing. We all fail sometimes. People think I've arrived and they don't know some of the things we go through. It's not a quick and fast journey. It's a marathon and not a sprint. Thank you.
So here I am with a cocktail of lessons to choose from, ranging between vice president and then the 160 Ghana cedi life-changing investment in series, and then the dance between failure and the reality of being able to share your story and your pain with somebody who is learning from you. and then the joy of being able to grow something from 12 people to over 3,000. And just the real you who says, listen, when I got there driving through the barns and the cows, I was saying, was Accra not a better place that I left? All these are beautiful lessons. And Christabel, they are available for everyone listening out there on our social media handles. Choose freely from all the lessons that she shared. Which one is your favorite? Let's have this big debate. Which one connected with you the most? And in the midst of it all, I want to say a big thank you to you, Christabel Dadzie, for making time to join us and talk about Ahaspora. I think it's a beautiful story you've shared. And I pray that the God who is so faithful will strengthen you this year, guide you this year. And when you come back next year for a renewal of your visa on Springboard, it will be an even more beautiful story with the numbers having grown way beyond what we discussed today and the quality of lives of people having been enriched even more. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Really feel honored. Really do.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one. It's a beautiful story you've told, and I really have enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so for all of us out there, this has been Springboard, your virtual university, brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana Enterprise Group with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. So we come your way again next week. My name is Albert Ukran saying God bless you, and God bless you.